Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Commander Crucible. Today we will be taking a quick look at Alela, well, however you pronounce it. I'm just going to stick with Alela for this video. Alela, Artful Provocateur. She's the new Brawl commander that is 1 an Esper, white, blue, black for a legendary creature Faerie Warlock. She's a 2/3 with flying, death touch, and lifelink. Other creatures you control with flying get +1/+0. Whenever you cast an artifact or enchantment spell, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. That was a lot of words on one card. I love the art, I love the theme and design of this card. I love her mana cost. She's a 2/3, so she's a bit smaller, so she's prone to, she can't really block or she can't really attack, but she does have flying, death touch, and lifelink, so maybe people aren't going to want to attack into you when you just have Alela out, but spells such as Lightning Bolt can take her out along with other basic removal spells. So Alela's pretty sweet because she has those keyword abilities, but she also has other creatures you control with flying get the +1/+0, and she makes flyers, so in reality when you make a 1/1, you're making a 2/1. So that's pretty good, as people use cards that make 1/1 Thopters for damage and attacking, but Alela is almost making 2/1s, so you're getting that added benefit right off the bat. So Alela's deck also gives you the opportunity to go a more artifact theme or a more enchantment theme, or you can just do a little bit of both, but usually going and focusing on one half of the theme means your deck's going to be a little bit stronger, as you're going to have all artifacts and artifact synergies, or all enchantment and enchantment synergies. And what's great about that is her colors give a really good benefit for both. So let's dive right into the deck. So first off, you know how I like my legendary creatures. We're going to start off with Hannah, Ship's Navigator. She's a 3 mana Azorius, 1 white and a blue, legendary human artificer. For her casting cost and tapping her, you're going to return a target artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. Already right there, this is probably one of the best legends in the deck. As things get blown up or taken out by your opponents, you can just bring them right back. It's really cheap, it's affordable. Hannah doesn't really seem that scary. She's slower, you get it back to your hand. It's not straight up recursion, but you're getting that cast again to get Alela's trigger off again. We have Sharum, the Hegemon. So for 6 mana, this pretty popular Esper commander has flying, and when she enters the battlefield, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So again, getting that recursion when things get blown up, when your threats or your big cards get blown up, Sharum's just going to bring them right back. We have Elesh Norn, Grand Cenobite. Now Elesh Norn is 7 mana, she's 5 white, but she is pretty awesome with decks that create little things like Alela's making those 1/1s, which get buffed by her to make them 2/1s, and then Elesh Norn's going to come in and give all other creatures you control +2/+2, so they're now going to be 4 3s with flying, and then creatures your opponents control get smaller by 2. So these 1/1 fairies are going to be massive and just be able to block and attack and really control the game when Elesh Norn's out. We have Syr, Master Thopterist, for 2 and a blue. You guys know that I love Syr, and he's an awesome commander in his own right, but whenever we cast the artifact spell, we're going to create a 1/1 Thopter with flying to get buffed by Alela, along with her fairy that she'll create. And then you pay 2 mana, 1 and a blue, and sacrifice 2 artifacts to draw a card. And an interesting legendary creature that I found, I've always known about, but it's Airtide, the Corrupted. So he's 2 an Esper, and he's a wizard legend. He's pretty old, but you pay 1 blue and you tap him to sacrifice a creature or enchantment, and you're going to counter target spell. So he's going to be our control package in here. We're going to be making 1/1s all the time, so we're never going to run out of creatures to sacrifice, and if we do, we can then sacrifice an enchantment to protect our other things and maybe use Hannah to bring that back to our hand. We have Syr the Enchanter for 1 an Esper. He's a human wizard with flying, so he would get buffed by Alela. Whenever Syr attacks, you may search your library for an enchantment card with converted mana cost 3 or less, put it onto the battlefield, and if you do, shuffle your library. Most of you probably know Syr in the CDH builds and lists and whatnot, and he is known to be really stacksy, really tutory, really combo-y. We don't necessarily have to use him for those reasons in this deck, but he's there to just fish out our smaller enchantments, to get them on the board, to tutor, to be very consistent. Obviously, you don't need to include him in this deck. I just thought it was a cool piece of tech to throw in here. And one that might be controversial, you might not think so, but it's a new legendary from M20, Sephara, Sky's Blade, for 4 white. You get a legendary angel, but here's the reason why I included her on this list. You can pay 1 white mana, tap 4 untapped creatures you control with flying, rather than pay this spell's converted mana cost. So you're going to pay a white, tap the 4 flyers that Alela's been creating the entire game, and you're going to get a flying lifelinker that says all other creatures you control with flying have indestructible. If you're not playing Sephara, I really don't know what other deck she goes into. She fits very, very well in this deck. She'll get buffed by Alela. She gives all your little fairies and thopters indestructible, so you can block with them all the livelong day. So now let's jump into another section, artifacts. The first artifact we're going to look at is Scrap Trawler. So for 3 mana, you get a 3/2 that says whenever Scrap Trawler or another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return to your hand target artifact card in your graveyard with lesser converted mana cost. So I threw this in here just because it's going to get us a Faerie from Alela, and it's also going to act as recursion when other artifacts we control die. And it's going to allow us to cast the artifacts we get back, so it's really nice that we get them back to hand so we get more fairies with Alela. Throne of the God Pharaoh. I would suggest putting Throne of the God Pharaoh in any deck that isn't primarily based in combat damage. That might not be the best colors for it as well. I know in my mono blue Urza deck, I run Throne of the God Pharaoh just because if I can't attack with my little thopters with fear of them dying, you're going to want to tap them for mana, and then Throne of the God Pharaoh is going to deal damage to each opponent. They are going to lose life, not take damage, equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. So maybe with Alela you have a way to tap them to make mana, or you're just attacking with them, and then at the beginning of your end step, you're going to have each of your opponents lose life equal to the amount of tapped creatures you control. It's just a really good way to lower the life totals of your opponents without directly hitting them, because just attacking with your 1/1s all the time, you're going to lose a lot of them. So Throne of the God Pharaoh is a very, very solid way in decks that don't primarily punch people with combat damage. We have Time Sieve, so for 1 a blue and a black, you're going to tap Time Sieve and sacrifice 5 artifacts. It could be Time Sieve as well, and you're going to take an extra turn after this one. So Alela's going to make you your fairies, and if you have a card like Psy out, he's going to make thopters, so you're going to want to take extra turns and just get more value. Time Sieve is, I can see it really going off in this deck, especially once it starts creating all of your other artifacts and tokens. A card seldom talked about, or that I've even seen, and I do think it's one of the better cards printed for EDH, is Aethersworn Adjudicator. For 4 and a blue, you get an artifact creature, Vidalcan Knight, with flying, so he'll get a buff from Alela. He says, pay 1 white and a black and tap the Aethersworn Adjudicator and destroy target creature or enchantment. So you can destroy your own things if you plan on recurring it to cast it again with Alela to get another fairy. And then you pay 2 and a blue to untap the Aethersworn Adjudicator. My bad. So if you have a lot of mana, you don't really have anything to do, it's an opponent's turn, it's about to get back to you, you can dump all your mana into destroying things and untapping him to get that effect later in the game, to either wind down the game so you can finish off an opponent, or destroying your things to get extra value from it. The classic Dimir card, the Baleful Strix, for a blue and a black. He's an artifact creature bird with flying and death touch. When he enters the battlefield, you're going to draw a card. Pretty darn simple. He's a great blocker in the air. He gets buffed from Alela, and you're going to get some card draw off of him. Now, a card that I think is mainly good with these artifact or just 1/1 token decks is the Sword of the Meek. For 2 colorless mana, equipped creature gets +1/+2, equip 2, and whenever a 1/1 creature comes into play under your control, you can return Sword of the Meek from your graveyard to play, and then attach it to that creature. So obviously, we all know that there are combos with Sword of the Meek where we sacrifice it to gain the 2 mana to our mana pool when an artifact gets destroyed or whatnot, we're going to create that Thopter and then bring Sword of the Meek back from our graveyard to that Thopter, sacrifice it again, repeat that chain over and over again and whatnot. But Sword of the Meek is just a nice way to have something in the graveyard that's going to come back and be attached to our 1/1 fairies that Alela is creating and buffing them up to make them a little bigger. We have Phyrexian Metamorph, so for 3 and a Phyrexian blue, so either a blue mana or 2 life, you can have the Metamorph enter as a copy of any artifact or creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So this is just a great way to copy a Gilded Lotus. You copy a big creature like a Consecrated Sphinx, it's going to come in, it's going to be an artifact, and it's going to make the 1/1 with Alela. Last one here on this quick look, for artifacts, we have Coat of Arms. So for 5 mana, each creature gets a +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares at least one creature type with it. So this card is great in tribal decks, but keep in mind that it will help your opponent's creatures as well, it will make them bigger. But with the amount of tokens, either Thopters or Fairies that we're going to be creating, these 2/1 Fairies when Alela is out are potentially going to be massive, just 11 10s that you're swinging in the air at your opponents. Coat of Arms has the potential to really control a game and turn the tide in your favor with Alela. Now we'll be moving on to our next section, Enchantments. So the first enchantment that I want to talk about, and probably one of the best ones that I would most likely want to tutor up with my Enlightened Tutor or my Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, is most likely going to be Anointed Procession. So for 3 and a white, it's just doubling season in white. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many tokens instead. Really simple, really straightforward. With the amount of tokens we're going to create with Alela, we're going to be wanting to double those. And it fits perfectly in with this next card, Cathar's Crusade. So for 3 white, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Again, it's just going to, when Anointed Procession doubles our tokens, we're going to put double the amount of 1/1 counters because the tokens are entering, and we're just going to have a massive board state to be able to smack our opponents around with. There's Sigil of the Empty Throne for 3 white. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. So this card's really just around whenever we cast our enchantments and not our artifacts. So maybe you'd want to put that in the side of Alela where you're just focusing on enchantments, but it's going to make us a 4/4 white flying angel that will be buffed by Alela and the fairy that she will create. There's All That Glitters for 1 and a white, enchant a creature. The enchanted creature gets a +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment you control. So you throw this on Alela, you've been creating Thopters all game, you have all your great enchantments out and whatnot. Alela is now a 15-16, and she's massive, she's ready to go. You're gonna kill someone with combat damage with All That Glitters. And then there's also smaller tech like Favorable Winds. It's a smaller enchantment for 1 and a blue, so it's very cheap. But it says creatures you control with flying get +1/+1. I mean, not really much more to say than that, other than Alela's going to make your 1/1s into 2/1s, and then this card will make them into 3/2s. They're a little beefier in the air, they deal a little bit more damage, so your opponents won't want to swing into you, and you'll be able to swing at your opponents, getting that chip damage up from 1 to 3. There's a new enchantment that came out with Throne of Eldrain, the Mirror Maid. 1 blue. You may have Mirror Maid enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. So it's a lot like the Phyrexian Metamorph, except it's an enchantment. Really straightforward, simple. You're just going to want to play this card, make it a copy of something that you already have out to maybe get 2 Anointed Processions per se. A card that has been doing a lot of work in my Teysa Orzhov Scion deck is Divine Visitation. So for 3 white, if 1 or more creature tokens would be created under your control, that many 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance are created instead. So with Alela out, we're going to be creating 5/4 angels with flying and vigilance. That is just such an added value. You play an enchantment followed by an artifact, you now have 2 5/4s, especially if you have Vidalcan Ori or the Leyline of Anticipation. You're flashing things in on an opponent's turn, they pass to you, and you just have 20 damage sitting on the board that you didn't have a turn ago. Etchings of the Chosen. Now this is an Orzhov enchantment that I think is really interesting and fits very, very well in this deck. It's from Modern Horizons. As Etchings of the Chosen enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, so we will choose fairies in this case. Creatures of the chosen type get a +1/+1, and pay 1, sacrifice a creature of the chosen type, and target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. So we can sacrifice a fairy that Alela is creating to protect Alela in the chance of a board wipe or spot removal. So that's going to be really nice to give us a little bit of a sacrifice outlet and just giving us protection on Alela when we need it. There's also Gravitational Shift, the last enchantment we're going to talk about. Gravitational Shift is 3 blue, and it has some sweet art of Emrakul on it. Creatures with flying get +2/+0, and creatures without flying get -2/-0. So non-flying creatures are going to deal a little bit less damage, while your 2/1s are now going to be 4/1s, and you're just going to be smacking around in the air. Now we're going to get into a section, good stuff. So to start off the good stuff section, we're going to go with Open the Vaults for 4 white. It's a sorcery that says return all artifact and enchantment cards from all graveyards to the battlefield under their owner's control. So now this is really going to help our opponents as well if someone else is running an Aura deck like an Estrid or a Bruna. But mainly this is going to be amazing for us because it just enters the battlefield, we get to stack our triggers and whatnot. If someone board wipes or does something to our board state, we're going to be able to just get that back in one turn with one spell. The Chief Engineer, which is 1 and a blue, it's a Vedalken Artificer. Artifact spells you cast have Convoke. So with the Chief Engineer, it's just going to help us as Alela is helping us make our 1/1 fairies, that the Chief Engineer is just going to allow us to tap those fairies to help us cast our artifact spells. So 1 creature equals 1 colorless mana towards that spell's casting cost. Next we have the Faerie formation, and as we all saw Jimmy play this in game nights, the Faerie formation is it's 4 and a blue for a flying 5/4 fairy. So it will get buffed by Alela to be a 6/4, and you pay 3 and a blue to create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying, which will be again buffed by Alela, and we'll draw a card. So it's just got really good return on the value. It's just pay 4 mana and you get to create a creature and draw a card. It's expensive as it's 5 mana, but it's a good blocker or attacker in the air being a 5/4, and I just think it's really good value for this deck. The Shimmer Dragon for 4 blue. It has flying, it's a 5/6, and it says as long as you control 4 or more artifacts, Shimmer Dragon has hexproof, so it can't be the targets of spells or abilities our opponents control to give it added protection. And tap 2 untapped artifacts you control and you draw a card, so if you have an entire board of untapped artifacts that you might not be using for mana, you can just tap those artifacts, draw some cards, and then an opponent passes to you and you untap those, and you do it again next go around the table. Now we have an interesting card that was in Throne of Eldrain as well. That card is Dance of the Manse. So for X white and blue, it's a sorcery that says return up to X target artifact and or non-aura enchantment cards with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And if X is 6 or more, those permanents are 4/4 creatures in addition to their other types. So Dance of the Manse seems to be like a really niche card that could really only value in decks like this where we're playing our artifacts and enchantment cards. It's going to bring them back, so it's recursion if it's under 6. If it's over 6, you're just going to make a bunch of 4/4s that's going to close out a game. We have Mentor of the Meek, so for 2 and a white, whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 1 colorless mana, and if you do, draw a card. So again, this is just some card draw in Esper decks. We're going to be making a lot of 1/1 fairies, and if we don't have mana to be spending on artifacts or enchantments, you might as well be drawing some cards. And the last spell we're going to look at on our list is Replenish. So for 3 and a white, return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to play. It's an older card, and it's an expensive card, but it is a great card nonetheless. So this is just 4 mana, it's really cheap. You're going to return your enchantments to your battlefield. Nothing really more to say about that. It's standard recursion, and again, it's older, it's expensive, but I mean, what can you expect for a 4 mana spell that's just going to bring everything back, and it only targets you, not your opponents, like Open the Vaults does. So there you have it. That is my take on Alela, the Artful Provocateur, one of the new Brawl commanders that came out with Throne of Eldrain. And I've always loved Esper as a color combination. control that white and black give you, along with the tutors from black, and just the card draw, counterspells, trickery that I've always loved in blue. It's my favorite color in Magic. And just to be added in with white and black, the Orzhov colors make it a really sweet color combination. Honestly, one of the most powerful in my opinion. So I think if you build this deck, you can build it in a really fun way to just interact with the board and your opponents, and to just make a lot of 1/1s and to benefit off of their value from entering and using them to block and attack. Or you could even build this deck in a spikier, competitive way where you're using those to combo off with certain things. Now, I'm not much of a combo-y CEDH player, but if you are, feel free to leave your opinions and discussions down in the comments below. Leave your deck lists and cards that you think are awesome in a more competitive Alela deck. So, thanks as always for joining me on this Commander Quick Look. Be sure to keep your eye out for the next one, and leave a comment below on who you think I should take a quick look at next.